Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Who University podcast. And we're going to have our new introduction attached to this pretty soon, right?
So fun. And music.
And music. I know.
We get to talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you introduce us.
Oh. You mean with our new introduction, or do you mean like?
Yeah, because then when our lovely support people that help us make this happen go back and edit, this part can be taken out. But in the meantime, I'm going to cue you to introduce us.
So, well, I kind of like, Mary, leave this little backstory that when we spent, the last couple of days over on the west side of Maui and us walking on the beach and us deciding like what were we going to name our podcast, and the Who University podcast is like really what felt good, and just us coming up with it so easily and freely is the word that's coming to mind.
Yep.
But like I picked the music that felt super good in like 10 minutes, and just having that recording that for Mary yesterday of just saying, like, welcome, because I thought about like, you're listening to, and I'm like, that sounds so formal. I'm like, welcome is like, come into our home. Let us, like
come into our energetic space, our domicile, our womb, our place of nurturing. Yeah.
So I decided to come up with, we both did, right? But like what I was playing with was like, welcome to the Who University podcast. We're your playmates, Tanya and Aaron, where we are constantly exploring who we truly are. And by we mean every single one of us. Yes. And, when there are people that say, well, we're your hosts. And I'm like, host sounds so business-like, right? I'm like, playmates. And then I told Tanya on the beach, I'm like, playmates is a little bit like, when I think of playmates, think about Playboy Mansion, like, but a little bit like, I don't know if cheeky is the word, but a little play on that, right? Like we're playing together, right?
Yes.
Our clients, our members, all of it, right? Like we are here to not to be this authoritative, we know better than you. We are experiencing the same things along our own path in our journey, and playmates just felt like, yeah, we're just having fun, and we're experiencing it, and we're having someone else, our clients along with us that we help along the way. But it's not this like,
we're walking right next
more than you. We're walking right
Yeah.
next to you, right? So playmates felt super fun. And then, when Mary asked us like, what are people, when they listen to the podcast, what do you want them to get out of it? It's like, this is our journey ourselves. And this is us being raw, real, and unedited, and sharing our experiences. And by us sharing our experiences, by us going first, then that gives, for lack of a better word, if you're listening and not watching, air quotes, permission for others to do the same, right? And so we're constantly, we, Tanya and Aaron, and also all of the 8 billion humans on the planet, we're constantly exploring who we truly are, right? And coming back home to ourselves and learning that, at our core, we're love and light and compassion and grace and worthy and deserving and all of those beautiful things. And we've just been acting from conditioning and paradigms. And that's,
you're giving me chills.
We're just a work of art all along, right? And that's like, what do I want people to get from this podcast? I want them to think about, you know what? Hey, me too. Like I'm not the only one. And just allowing, for me, it is very important that people see the rawness, the vulnerableness of us and Who University, because it is with that, I believe, where we give ourselves permission to be the same, right? To change from that space and perfection doesn't exist, right? But like, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to, like, we fuck it up all the time. And
all the time.
So it's important to me that and I know we're not, but like hierarchy is the word that comes to mind, right? Like we're not. So
yeah. God, I fucking love you.
So I'm Erin. This is Tanya. Let's party hardy.
I love that you actually took a moment to share that, because I think about, you know, we've talked about this concept of love and power, and me finding my way into the unconditional love, and you in the empowerment, right? Not power over or powered under. It kind of like both ends of the spectrum of unconditional love and empowerment, and the space that you and I, our third most important value to us is that playfulness, that ability to go back to our place of wonder, our childlike selves, where we can experiment and explore and find who we truly are, not with all of the conditioning and the patterns that have been both in our experience and in our DNA. And I love that you and I have such diverse backgrounds, that we have some really uncanny similarities between us, and we have, in a lot of cases, experienced what seems like polar opposite, and yet they're really the same.
Yep.
And with that, we get to sort of be an example. And I realize that we're two white women, but we also speak for the dichotomy, the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the two opposites, the two ends of the spectrum. And oftentimes we cross in the middle, with those opposite feelings of either being worthy or unworthy, lovable or unlovable, empowered or disempowered. And you know what I want for people in this podcast is to feel like what you have offered me, what my experience has been with you as my best friend and business partner, is an opportunity to be my most vulnerable, raw, unprotected, unshielded self, and feel safe to do that. I couldn't have gotten on the podcast that we did, the last one, and exposed myself in the way that I did any other time in my life, or with anyone other than my husband. Like, there are very few people that knew what now the world, anyone listening to our podcast, might know about me. And to feel the kind of safety and acceptance that you have given me is the very thing that you and I want to create for the world. This a safe place for us to explore all of these stories, all of these conditions and patterns in which we have accepted or believed are us, that we are either deserving or undeserving, that we are either worthy, unworthy, empowered or disempowered, right? Have a place in a space in which people can come. And, you know, if listening to the podcast is the one point of contact that we have, fabulous. And we have so much more available to people. So I love that you shared what you were wanting and give me a space in which I can share what I bring to the world. Right?
Yeah, Tanya thinks she's all sneaky and being like, so I have something I want to tell you. She like tells me this all the time. Like, there's something I want to tell you. And then she'll tell me and I'm like, yeah, I already knew that. I saw it. I watched it or whatever, you know? Oh, I have this to tell you. I'm like, yeah, I've known that. You're not like telling me anything I don't know, or like, I mean, about your past, like, you know, when I didn't know you, right? Like you have to tell me those things, but like things that I noticed, what you do now, I'm like, yeah, know it. And it's just, yeah, I think it's really important. Like, we say that we want, or that we tell people we unconditionally love them, but really it's more like, as long as you fit these certain parameters and rules and fit in this pretty box, you know? So it's really fun to be in a space, you know, with you and I to play, we call it tennis, play tennis, right? Like meaning pass and forth. She, you know, Tanya said the other day, she's like, well, I'm glad we don't have transformations at the same time, because it'd be kind of difficult. We're both like, you know, who's helping us when we're both having a transformation. So when
there
I say
have been moments that we're both just true. Like, yeah, I'm over here in a puddle. How about you? Yep, same. All right, girl, I'm here. I love you.
But creating, you know, Who University to have this like loving space for all of the people that want to be a part of us, you know, with us and on this journey. So I'm so grateful.
So on that note, before we get started on sort of our part 2 or follow up to our last podcast, I want to invite everybody, if you're listening, just to take a moment and let's tune into our breath. It's one of the easiest ways that we can get back in our bodies, back in awareness of our bodies, because that mind-body connection is so incredibly important. And most of us have forgotten that we have a body. We are not the body. We have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts. We have emotions and sensations, but we are not our emotions and our sensations. So I invite you to just notice your body right now. Notice where you're sitting. Are you standing? Are you upside down at the gym? Like, where are you right now? Where is your body in space and time? And where is your breath? How far is it making it inside your body? Is it making it just to your throat? Is it making it to the top of your chest? Is it making it all the way down to your belly button? Just notice. Let's breathe for a minute. Breathe in. I was doing this in the car the other day where I would just breathe in and I would practice audibly breathing out, just sort of like giving a vibration to what was coming out of me. So let's be silly for just a moment. What kind of sound do you want to make with that out breath? For some of you, depending on if you're at work or if you're feeling like you're not very resourced right now, that may come out through gritted teeth. It's okay to growl. And if you're feeling a little sheepish about making some sounds when you exhale, that's also okay. No judgment there. So let's take one more breath together.
Let's get this party started.
Let's do it. All right.
So, as you all know, if you haven't watched, go back, watch the episode, the most recent one, where we talk about the stories we hold. And I think I titled it Around Love and Money, but it's basically all of the stories that we hold, that we've experienced in our life, and then we hold them in our bodies because we think we have to either punish ourselves, shame ourselves, guilt ourselves, whatever that might be. So when we decided to do that episode, we thought it was just going to be one episode. And then after we did the episode, Tanya texted me and was like, we got to do a part 2. We got to do a part 2. So quick recap. Basically, Tanya, back 30 plus years ago, Tanya worked at a bank, stole $300, ended up going, because of probably the shame and the guilt, correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, because of the shame and the guilt, ended up being hospitalized and using that $300 to pay that hospital bill. And so when I asked her about, she wanted to share that story and how she had kept that shame and guilt for 30 plus years as a way to punish herself around love and around money. And so when I asked her during the podcast episode, so after that time, did you ever steal anything else? And Tanya's response was,
actually, I think you said, and after that, you never stole again. And
okay.
I didn't stop to correct you. I didn't say, hold up, hold on a second. I just had this feeling sweep over my body. And the sensation that was there was, why did you go this far and not correct what she said, which is as good as lying?
Mm-hmm. Here we go back to your stories of lying.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So, early on in yours and my relationship, I shared with you an experience that I had with my husband when I very first got the Gabor Mate book, When the Body Says No. I was so engrossed in that. I had gotten it from the mailbox that day, and I was trying to multitask, as many of us manifest generators do. And my multitasking was to empty the car with a bunch of groceries, try and bring in the garbage can, and check the mail all at the same time. I had chosen to leave the garbage can because I didn't want to try and pull it around the side of my husband's truck and risk scratching it because he was parked fairly close to the sidewalk. I left it there. When I saw that I had the book in the mail, I got so excited about it. I went in my office and just started pouring through it and highlighting and, well, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, so many epiphanies. My husband said he was going to go get gas because he was diving the next day. And I was like, okay, bye. See you in a little bit. And when he went to leave, he came back in and he's like, did you know the garage door was open? And I was like, oh shoot, I forgot and left it open. Is everything there? He's like, yeah, everything's fine. And like, try to remember to close the garage door. And I'm like, sorry. And then head right back in the book, right? And then a few minutes later, I hear the garbage can coming around. And I was like, oh shit, I totally forgot that I left the garbage can sitting right in front of the truck. He comes around and he's mad.
Meaning he can't drive out of his driveway,
exactly.
Because it's in the hood. Okay.
It was right in front, and it was short enough that he didn't see it with the truck, and it was close enough that even though the sensor went off, he was like, it didn't make sense to him, right? Because he didn't see anything, and he was like, I'm going forward in my driveway. Like, all that's there is the road. So he hit the garbage can, not at any kind of speed because it was inches, right?
Right.
But when he brought it back around, and he's like, how did that get there? I froze. And in that moment, I realized it was because my old pattern, my old conditioning that I always would go to was lie. I don't know how that got there. That's weird.
And real quick, we lie to keep connection.
Yeah. Or we lie to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is my husband at that time, he's like, he knew I had been meditating and stuff. And he's like, you might, because eventually I came around to the front of the house and I was like, it was me that left it there. And he's like, why didn't you say that when I brought it around the back? And I was like blue screened. I couldn't say anything.
Frozen.
I was just, was frozen. So when you look at our stress response, we either want to fight, we want to run, or we freeze, right? And so he suggested you might want to go sit with that for a while and figure out what it was. And when I sat with that, what I realized was, here we go back to that, like, why didn't you learn your lesson? Well, the lesson I learned was if you make them mad, they leave, right? And he was already upset when he came back. My inclination was to lie, but because of the work that I had started doing, I interrupted that pattern of lying, and I was just kind of stuck in a frozen state. When you and I recorded the podcast, I was like, holy shit, this was like a garbage can moment. Because when you said, I had basically just revealed that I had done this thing that I had you know, regardless of the fact that I had been sick and I had gone through a really traumatic procedure and I was already kind of in a like not myself state, that I had stolen this money. And then you were like, and then you never stole again. And I was like, I was frozen again, because here I am. I'm now telling the whole world that I've done this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all the, you know, even though I've done so much work with like letting go of shame, letting go of guilt, letting go of fear, I had this feeling in my body, but I didn't have words to say, wait, let me dispute that.
Yep.
Because I did. And what I shared with Aaron in the text afterwards was that I had stolen one more thing after that. And it was when David and I moved into our current house, and I needed to have a separate alarm clock from him. So I gave him mine, and I had stolen an alarm clock, a clock. And I was like, I was basically, every time I looked at that when I got up in the morning, when I went to bed at night, it reminded me of the time that I was doing for being a thief. And like just the metaphor of that. And I was like, that's what I had that clock for like 26, 27 years. I had it for a long time, until I finally was like, I don't want to look at this anymore. And I gave it away. I donated it. But yeah, so I was like, hold up. We need to do part 2 because I need to come clean. And all the other stuff that then came after that, especially on our trip.
I want to say one thing real quick for
Yes.
everyone listening. Just elaborate a little bit about, for people that don't know the stress responses, just not go into depth, but like you already named, you know, fight. That's my favorite. That's what my chosen one was. Flight, like run, right? Like you think about animals, you're either going to fight, right? You're in stress, you're going to fight, right? 2 lions fighting. You're either going to flee like an antelope, right? You're going to freeze like deer in the headlights. And then fawn is another one, which I think is newer, right? But newer in terms of, I guess what I want you to elaborate on is, in the moment when you're in that, your body is in that stress response.
The body
your
takes
mind,
over.
Yeah, your body takes over. So when, and I think I want to say this for everyone, because people like me, Aaron, are very similar and have been similar to your husband, of like, well, speak up, right? But for some people, if just think about 2 partners. If one partner's stress response is fighting and one partner's stress response is freezing, now we can understand why our partner who freezes doesn't speak up. Yes, we as the partner that our stress response is fight is to speak up. But the partner that freezes or flees doesn't. And so it is not an intentional thing. It's not they're lying and they're deceitful, and however we want to story all of that. Right. So maybe I don't necessarily need you to elaborate. I guess I did it, but like,
no, that was beautiful. I am so glad you said that, because it's true. It does, like, it's shown up with my husband before. Like, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you speak up? And I'm like,
and this can be a different podcast, but I think this is really important because you have talked about your sexual assaults before. And for someone like Aaron, old Aaron, I wasn't in that position, but if that were to be, I would fight, right? Like all the things. And there are some people like you who would freeze and shut down. And so just being mindful and having compassion that everybody has their own stress response, and it might not look like how yours is, and it doesn't it doesn't mean that someone's trying to be deceitful or, like I said already, lying or whatever. It's just, we have our own different stress responses. And so when you are in that state, you are literally no longer in your prefrontal cortex, in your rational, logical thinking mind. You are in like, I got to survive. What do I got to do to protect and save myself? So,
and the body takes over.
And like you said, the body takes over. So,
and there might be, so you have a, like, kind of one of your go-tos has been that anger, that fight, that speak up, that, oh, hell no, you're not gonna, right? Yep. And there may be some areas for you
100%.
where the wounds were a little bit more tender, where you might be I'm just going to push that away. Yes. I'm going to remove myself from this situation.
100%.
I'm going to flee.
I'm glad you said that, because it's not all or none, right? It's not like we're all fighter. It's not like if I'm a fighter and that's my stress response, I always fight. There's also places where I completely flee, right? Or I freeze and don't say anything, because so we all have or use all the different stress responses. I mean, come on, Fawn, people pleasing. Hello, right here. Yeah. Not number one student, but like I'm really good at it. I used to be really good at it, you know?
Right.
So yeah. I'm glad you said that.
So for me, going all the way into freeze has been more of my story, because very early on, I had situations where, like, that's all I could do in order to survive the situation, was to completely shut down. And yeah, even with the sexual assaults, so you can put this in your notes for the podcast. Stephen Porges talks about the Polyvagal Theory, and that, hearing him, when I went through coach training, I had a coach that, the facilitator for our coach training, that did what was called whole person coaching. And she was very much into understanding that sort of thing. And I listened to or watched a thing with Dr. Porges talking to someone else. And I remember when I saw that, just thinking, holy shit, because for so many years, I thought I deserved what happened to me, and that is why I didn't fight. Like, in the times that I was sexually assaulted, that I was old enough to understand. It happened to me when I was really little too, but when I was old enough to understand, there was this story that was going on about, well, I deserved this because of either what I was wearing, how I was acting, because I was seeking attention, I was wanting to be loved. So somehow I deserved this. And because my body would just shut down and not move, not fight, I felt betrayed. Like, obviously I deserve this, so just deal with it, right? And I would shut down. That programming is in our bodies. It's physically in our bodies. 95% of the programs that we run are in our bodies. We talk about this in Wellness from Within. Understanding that, and understanding that when we go into that place, it's not that we're making a conscious choice to fight or to not fight. It's not that we're making a conscious choice to get ourselves out of a situation. Like, when we believe that's where we deserve to be, that's where we end up. When we believe that if you make them angry, they will leave, so do whatever you can not to make them angry. And this was a story with my dad, right? My mom and my dad got in a fight when she was 8 months pregnant with me. And she said no. They subsequently end up getting divorced. And as a result, I'm like, don't make my dad mad, because when he gets mad, he leaves. And so
that's why I said earlier, you did say, I said, well, we lied to not break connection. And you said we lie to keep us safe. And the truth is, it's both, right? Both. Like it's to keep us safe. And why do we lie? It's to, and not just from a stress response of, we lie so that if my mom gets mad at me, I'm just going to lie so that she won't be upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also sometimes lie because everyone else is talking about this and I want to be included and I want to have, that connection. And so we fudge and fib the story or whatever it might be so that we can stay connected. So,
yeah. So after talking to you about that, I was like, I felt so liberated about making the decision to share it, and also terrified because I still had yet to share the story. And then when that part of it came up, I was just like, shit, I haven't done anything. I haven't released anything because now everybody knows, and I still lied because I didn't say something and I didn't have the words in that moment to say something. I was in a little bit of my freeze of like, what do I like? I mean, it's a fucking alarm clock versus $300, right? And so
which is just judgment of your brain, right? Because no matter what, it's still a stealing, and it's still a story you hold of thievery.
Yep, of being a thief, being wrong. Add that to the fact that my mom had time in jail, and it's like, well, this is just who I am. I'm a liar and a thief. I'm a dirty liar. Like, think about all the things that we say about those kind of things. You're just a dirty thief or a liar or a cheat or well, I heard words all my life like toxic and infection. When my dad kicked me out at 15, I talked about that in the last podcast. When he kicked me out, he didn't even, so I had everything, all my personal stuff, like my boundaries had been completely blown. All the personal notes that I had that were on the table, all my personal things, everything was like out exposed. Then he physically abused me as well as berated me. And then he wouldn't even let me stay the night in the house that night. He sent me off to some church friends to sleep on their couch because he didn't want me infecting the other children with my dirtiness, my badness, my wrongness. Like, I don't want your toxic being anywhere near my other children. Like,
so how did that manifest in your body then?
So showing up, well, actually all my life I've had skin conditions. I've had
what we would label them, a dermatologist would label them as what?
Eczema, severe dermatitis, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I noticed, like, along this journey that I've been on, getting out of our house and sort of moving towards like letting go of attachments and things. My first
present day, you and your husband getting out of your house. Okay.
Yes, my husband David and I recently rented our house out with the goal or intention of moving onto a boat to sail the world, to dive the world.
Yeah.
And our first stop was getting out of our house and getting rid of all of our things so that our friends could move in and rent our house.
Right.
And we wanted to stay nearby during that adjustment. And so I went to stay with a friend of mine. My husband and I basically stayed in her barn for 6 weeks, in her little apartment over her barn. And I had been experiencing, like, all my life, I'd had experiences with eczema really bad, like ever since I was very little. Lung infections. I was hospitalized as an infant for pneumonia, severe infections. I used to get bronchitis all the time, and our lungs are part of our power, right? I used to get bronchitis. I had to have my tonsils taken out when I was little because I would get strep all the time. So I was constantly getting infections, and then my skin would show up with boils and pus and dermatitis and eczema so severe that it was just raw and incredibly painful. It went away for a little while, but when I started this work in transformation, it came back, and it came back with a vengeance.
It's kind of like it gets worse before it gets better, which I think
Yes.
sometimes can kind of scare off people, but it's
Yep.
kind of like anything, right? Like sometimes it's got to get a little bit, you feel like you're taking 5 steps backwards and 1 step forward, or your body's, you know, coming up with all of these symptoms, you know, but that is because it is finally getting released and being let go and up and out. And so it can look like, to the person experiencing it and to your other family members and or friends or whomever, that you're sick or that something's wrong with you, but it's actually the body just dumping and expressing and getting rid of all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have had extensive conversations about pooping, crying, skin, like I call it my new diaper rash, right? The old story of like my inner child, all of the things that babies do. They, you know, like they poop, they pee, they have all kinds of, they have blowouts, right?
And I mentioned this on another episode. Sorry, Tanya, I just want to say this.
Yeah.
I mentioned this on an other episode, and I'll also put this in the show notes. But Dr. Joe talks about this. This is the dumping of all of the shit and the grunge and the toxicity and all of those things that we have been storing in our at a cellular level.
Yep.
This is the body dumping and upgrading it, and so it looks like sickness, it looks like eczema, it looks like, you know,
it looks
bronchitis,
like spending hours on the toilet, or having, like a year ago, when I was going through an earlier level of this, I had an abscess show up on one of the roots of my a tooth, and pimples coming out of nowhere, and I had shingles like 3 or 4 times over the course of this last couple of years. And when we relocated ourselves to my friend's house and we're living in her apartment over the barn, we offered to pay. We offered to give her money in compensation for us being there, and she refused. And so we said we would help her, and she was having difficulty receiving. And there was one day where she went offline.
Her lid was flipped.
Her lid was flipped. And she was saying that all I did was take, which then hit that story of, you're just a thief. You just use people. You just take from people. You don't offer anything. You don't give anything, right? You're worthless. You're just a parasite or a leech on people. My whole back, I had huge spots of just flame red dermatitis, eczema show up on my back and on my hands. Then when we moved here to California and are staying with our friends, and we're like, what can we pay you? How do we contribute? And they're like, just having you here is that contribution. And I'm like, is that enough? Oh my God, if they found out like these things that I've done in my past, would they even trust me in their house, you know?
Yep.
And so like a bunch of safety and security issues started coming up, which is a whole nother podcast that we'll talk about. Like, where do you find your safety? Where do you find your security? Came up. And then with this, having told the story about the bank, and then knowing that like, here, I thought it was free. I thought it was free to finally like just let it all hang out. Like, here it is. And you can judge me if that's what you need to do. I have come to a place of full circle forgiveness and release of all of this. And then that came up with the stupid alarm clock. And I'm like, of course, it was a clock. It was doing my time, right? Like every time I looked at that, I knew, I'm like, fucking stolen clock. God dang it. Like, just, yeah. So then fast forward to coming to Maui. Like, and what did you say that you wanted? Miss, I can say what I want. What did you say that you
I'm like,
wanted about
what part?
Maui?
What part?
What did you say that you wanted? I mean, it is going to be your birthday in a hot second.
No, you suggested, okay, first, are you talking about the hotel?
Yeah.
Or what are we talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
So when you said you were coming, you were like playing with the amount of days and me saying what I wanted. My parents are coming tomorrow, actually, Thursday. So for some of you listening, that would be the 18th. Tanya was saying like, I'm going to come in some of those days. She was like, I can meet your parents. I'm like, that's a no. I do not. And it's not that I don't want you to meet my parents. It's that the dynamic with me and you is very different than the dynamic with my parents. And I don't want to navigate that and or split my time between the two. Like when I'm with you, I want to be all with you and doing the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then when my parents come, right, like being with them. And so I told you, like, listen, you come, but I don't want to see you when my parents are here, lovingly, of course, right? But saying what I wanted, right? Before I would have like tried to make it work. And then I was like, no, like, I just want to be with my parents. And then I just want to be with Tanya, right?
I need all my energy to do it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So then I said to Jason, Tanya's coming over and he's like, you guys should like rent a place for a couple of days and like go hang out and have a lot of fun. And I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. And so I think I said what Jason said to you and you're like, yeah, and your birthday's coming up and like, let's choose someplace luxurious and let's, and after one of the things I've learned about myself is like, I love nice things. I love nice hotels and Airbnbs and all of the things. Mm-hmm. But I have had a story from my parents, right? Too much, too expensive, can't afford it, all that. So I just shut that down. But after our travels have continued to elevate and things that I'm grown accustomed to.
And the EFT that we did.
Oh, and the EFT that we did together. Yep. That will be in our portal if you're a member. So, just the realizing and asking like, okay, I either want to stay at Hotel Wailea or I want to stay I think I was looking at the Andaz and I may not be saying that correctly. Mm-hmm. And you at the time were all on board. You're like, yes, like let's do it. Choose it. Let's do it. So little Aaron gets so excited and is like, okay, I'll start looking at it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of you had booked, let me see how this goes.
I booked my first airfare.
You booked your airfare, first class, which was an up level for you. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you start sending me these VRBOs. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? In Tanya's true manifesting generator, she's just pumping me full of text messages, like boom, 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 boom. I mean, like I haven't even had a chance to look at one and she's already sending me 5. And I'm like feeling in my body, like irritated, frustrated, and annoyed. And I'm like, wait a second, what is happening here? I'm like, and I told Jason, I'm like, I don't understand what just happened. We just went from, we can stay at Hotel Wailea and the Andaz, depending on if I like it or not, to you're sending me these Airbnbs that are like, in my opinion, right? Yeah. And I told Jason, I'm like, wait a second, like, I'm a no, like, I don't want to spend my money and like half-ass this shit. Like, no, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. And I'm okay with either. Right. And so I say to you, hang on a second. I think I said, what changed here or something like that. I like to drop my truth bombs with one-liners.
Yep. You were like, what's happening here? What changed? Yeah. And then you said, is this coming from fear?
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment that.
Well, before that, you said, well, I just bought a first class ticket. Like, hey, the way I interpreted it, you may not have said it this way, but it was like, hey, you should be grateful, which is a story my dad says, right? Like, you should be grateful. I just up leveled and did first class. And I was thinking, I didn't fucking ask you to do first class. We talked about doing Hotel Wailea. How you get here is how you want to get here. And having little Aaron be like, and also one of my stories has been like, you tricked me. You told me we were going to do this and now we're doing this, which I know I'm not tricked, right? Like you were coming from, I'm really scared. I don't want to use my money. I don't want to ask my husband to pull out of his IRA, even though it's joint money. That's a whole nother topic podcast. But you didn't want to ask, you didn't want to feel uncomfortable in that moment, right? You didn't want to feel what needed to be felt to have what you wanted to have.
Yeah, there was all kinds of discomfort going on with do I deserve to fly first class? And then as it was, I had booked the flight on Alaska and I had found just the right fare. I was like, I'm going to get first class as cheap as I possibly can, maybe use some points, whatever, right? And figure this out. I was like trying to book it 6 ways to Sunday. And then I got that booked. And then it was like, oh, do you want to book a hotel? And I was like, sure. And I looked at the Wailea and it was like $1,000 a night. And I just went, oh, shit.
Did you know when I was talking about Hotel Wailea that it was going to be $1,000 a night? Did you even look it up beforehand? Okay.
No. And so when I saw that, I was like, red alert, red alert, red alert, red alert. Like we've just blown, like blown a
stress
gasket.
response.
Yes. And then I looked at Andaz and I was like, it's no better. It's like something. Like I was like, oh shit. Like this was asking me to go from I don't deserve to receive that. I don't deserve to take that time to go. And now I'm like, oh, I'm just going to scoop up a big heap of taking the time to go. Then I'm going to scoop up a big heap of doing it for myself. I'm not even asking my husband to come. Then I'm going to take another big scoop of, I'm going to book first class. And then I'm going to add like 3 scoops of $1,000 a night. Like I couldn't balance that cone. There was no way I was going to be able to eat all of that and receive it.
That's a very good analogy, because I always use the word like calibration. Like sometimes what we need to do, and I'm just using this airplane because I think everyone can relate to it. It's like sometimes we have to go from economy to like extra comfort. And then once we're comfortable with extra comfort and our nervous system has regulated to that, then we can go to business class. And then once we're in business class, then we can go to first class. And then we can go to Emirates, where are we on that, on that spectrum, I guess, right? Like, and we can't jump from business class to like Emirates full on, have the entire front part of the plane to yourself kind of thing, right? Like it is a little bit of baby steps, and that's okay, because each baby step you're going to feel is going to feel like you're jumping from here to here. Because I do think, and it's important that everyone listening understands, is like when you take that big of a jump, you can actually just shut down your nervous system. Like it's just too much for your nervous system to process. So it would be better, I don't say better, but for lack of a better word, right? Like to do a little baby step and feel all of those feels, the uncomfortableness, all of that, and then get used to what that feels like and then move on up.
Yeah, it's just like children. You don't take a kid that's just learned to crawl and put them on a motorcycle. No, first they got to learn to crawl. Then they got to find their stability walking. And then they got to find their stability running. And then getting on a trike and then balancing on a bike. And then from there, like maybe moving to a bigger bike. And then from there, maybe to a motorcycle. But you don't just jump from one end to the other. Your nervous system and your body, your thoughts, your beliefs about who you are, no. And I've booked first class before when David and I have gone on trips that are like a long way away. And I have had the experience of coming back from Fiji on a ridiculously long flight and being stuck between 3 other Samoan men that were so big, and then sound freaking sleep. And I couldn't get up out of my seat to pee. And then I ended up with a bladder infection.
The difference here, and the difference of first class coming to Maui to come visit me, and the difference with what you've done for, other places, is this was coming from a pure place of desire. I think you've used justification for the other first class, right? Like the comfort and the diving, and then I don't want to be tired. And we like justify why we want what we want, versus here was like, I just want to fly first class and I want the extra space and the comfort because I want it, period.
And because I
deserve it, right?
Deserve it.
Yeah.
Right? That was my that was my expansion moment. And then when I started looking at the cost of the hotel, that was the shit my pants. Like, this might be a little too far for my nervous system. So I canceled that flight, reined it back in. You and I had a discussion, and you're like, hey, we agreed to this. Is there a problem? I was like, and you asked me, are you scared? And I was like, yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared that I don't deserve this. Like, I'm still practicing what it's like to be somebody who's deserving, because I practiced for 53 years.
Yep.
Not
deserving. Yeah.
And not only that 53 years, but I have family. I have in my DNA that I was gifted at birth a story of not deserving.
Yep.
So I get to Maui, first class, by the way. And we stay at a beautiful place that Aaron has picked out. And I'm like, this is gorgeous. And we were having so much fun working together, and it just felt so good. And I'm like, I want this all the time. And that last night that we were in the hotel, I had this moment of like, oh, I don't want to go. And I started bawling. This is one of the other things that I absolutely love and adore about Aaron. My husband, not there yet, and that's okay. When he sees me crying, when he sees me physically having to express and let go of things, it makes him very uncomfortable. And
he's not the only human on the planet, just so everyone knows, right? Like a lot of us, right? It's a learned practice that we can hold safe space for someone when they're really showing their emotions. Because we want to fix it, right? So we can feel better. We want them to feel better so we can feel better, because we are not used to not feeling all of our emotions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I woke up that last morning just uncontrollably sobbing. I'd had a dream about like being little and being ridiculed and having no power, and there was a lot there tied to that deserving story. And I ended up like getting out of bed and coming over and knocking on Aaron's door and cracking open the door and going, Mama, which, like, my term of endearment for Aaron is to be like, Mommy. And so she's like, come here. And she just cradled me while I bawled my eyes out. And the other thing that then ended up happening when I don't know if it was that day or if it was the day before. I think it was the day before, actually, when we were walking, that I had shared something about like not washing my hands.
Yeah.
And what I had said, because what was coming up along with the tears was my hand was just on fire. I had blisters just.
Do you want to show people what it looks like now?
Yeah, I don't know if this comes across very well.
You can
on the
see
camera.
where it's, slow it down, don't move. So you can see like the middle FU finger is really red and raw, right? And then that ring finger is red. And then what about your pinky? Yep. So all of that was like super red, inflamed. And was it oozing or not oozing?
Yes.
Yep. So oozing, almost like a second-degree burn.
Yeah. And so that was coming up. And so when Aaron and I were walking on the beach, I had said something about that and about, like, I don't wash my hands. My dirty little secret is that I hate washing my hands. I'll rinse them off sometimes, especially if people are watching and I'm coming out of the bathroom. But I'm like, first of all, I don't pee or poop on my hands. I know exactly, like, I have the toilet paper shield and I know everything that I've touched. Like, I've been hyper aware of everything that I touch. And I used to be a germaphobe, which made it even more punishing because I was always in cleansers and things like that. And that was my punishment, right? It was the amount of pain that I had to endure if I didn't have gloves, and even gloves caused me discomfort. But the soap would just be like salt in the wound, soap in the wound. It would sting so bad, and it would just highlight how much, like, this is shame. This is shame and disgust coming to the surface. This is toxicity. This is infection. This is the nastiness, the dirtiness of who I've been inside finally coming out. And yeah, and here I thought I was hiding it. And Aaron's like, girl, I see you. Like, that's one of the gifts that you and David have always given me, is you see me for who I am. And each time I find myself again, I get to realize that you guys have seen me all along and not rejected me. Because that has been my story. That has been my deep wound, is a womb of rejection and abandonment. You're disgusting. I'm going to leave you behind. You're toxic. I'm going to leave you behind. You're infectious. I need to take you to the doctor and get antibiotics for you because, like, you're infectious, and not in a, oh gosh, you have such an boisterous smile, right? Yeah. So each time I get to remove those stories and I get to see my true self again, and then realize that, like, I was talking to my husband about this morning. I'm like, you have always seen me, whether conscious or unconscious. You have always seen me and never rejected me. And now I can see myself. Like, that's what this work has done for me. And I couldn't put a price tag on that. There's no amount of first class millions of dollars that could ever buy me what this is. Mm-hmm. And so just having come full circle and knowing that, you know, sometimes it's going to come out of our bodies and we're going to have stinky armpits and stinky poopers and pus and nasty stuff coming out of us. And it's worth it as long as we're actually in the process of being able to let that go and to change the narrative. Like, to realize that I'm deserving, to realize that I'm worthy, to realize that I'm lovable unconditionally. I have that for myself now. That's everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's everything. That's what we do.
That's what we do, right? That's what we do.
Yeah. So this experience this last week, being with you in Maui, being able to start saying, no, this is what I want. I know who I am. I know who I really am, without all of that baggage, without all of that story. Bringing that into my body in place of what has been in my body, which has felt so heavy and so draining. And so, I mean, think about whenever you're sick. Think about whenever you've had an infection. That takes so much energy. Yeah. And here I go with my breath, right? Grounding into that space of
Does it feel complete?
It does. It does. Feels really good. Playing with you, is one of my greatest joy.
Okay, my friends, all of us, until next time.
Until next